Hello, surely some of you have won lottery prizes before. But when it comes to the jackpot, especially those prizes reaching millions of dollars, equivalent to tens of billions of Vietnamese dong, for many people, that's just a story on the news. However, the story we are about to discover today is a real event that happened to a very ordinary middle-aged man in the United States. By purchasing a lottery ticket by chance, he suddenly became a millionaire with a prize of up to $30 million, roughly 738 billion Vietnamese dong at the current exchange rate. From a life of poverty, he transformed into a wealthy man overnight. Everyone thought that from now on, he would have a good, leisurely life. He himself thought so, but the harsh truth is that this unexpected sum of money not only didn't bring him a better life, but it also became a burden and the source of countless troubles. Misfortunes came one after another, causing him to gradually lose friends, family, money, and ultimately, his life. For him, that gigantic prize was not a gateway to paradise, but the beginning of a direct nightmare. So what happened? Next, let's turn back time to 2006 to delve into this dramatic story. Florida, also known as the Sunshine State, is located in the southern part of the United States. Seen from above, most of the state's area is surrounded by the sea. This unique geographical location provides Florida with a long coastline, picturesque scenery, and a network of famous amusement parks and beaches, attracting millions of tourists annually. Therefore, tourism is Florida's spearhead economic sector. Our story today takes place in Florida, with the main character being an utterly ordinary man, Abraham Shakespeare. Shakespeare, 40 years old, was homeless and had no stable job. His life revolved around finding ways to fill his stomach. He was born on April 24, 1966, into a poor family in Lakeland, Florida. His parents were uneducated, had no stable jobs, and their income was only enough to cover the most essential needs. Although Shakespeare had the chance to attend school, he had to drop out in 7th grade. With a low educational level and parents who were too busy making a living to take care of him, Shakespeare quickly became a street kid. He frequently engaged in troublemaking, delinquency, and by the age of 13 had to enter a juvenile detention center for petty theft. Shakespeare stayed in the center for 5 years. After being released to make a living, Shakespeare had to do all sorts of manual labor, like garbage collection, carrying loads at construction sites, etc. Life was always precarious, sometimes having enough to eat, sometimes not. Amid these hard days, Shakespeare managed to father a child with a girlfriend he knew since childhood. The joy of becoming a father didn't last long, as the burden of survival caused them to part ways, and the child was left for the mother to raise. Despite his criminal past and rough appearance, those who truly knew Shakespeare had a good impression of him. They described him as simple, kind-hearted, with the soul of a child. In 1999, at the age of 33, Shakespeare met Smith, a barber, and the two quickly became friends. Smith had a relatively stable life, working at a barber shop in the town. While the job wasn't lucrative, it was enough to cover his living expenses. Smith cared a lot about Shakespeare, not only giving him free haircuts, but also paying him for odd jobs at the shop. Thanks to Smith's help, Shakespeare's life was somewhat stabilized for a long time. Shakespeare also tried to find other jobs, like working as a sanitation worker or a laborer at construction sites, but he couldn't keep any job for long. Time passed until 2006, when Shakespeare transitioned to a new job. He became a delivery worker for a local food company named EMBM. His regular partner was Michael. Their job was to drive a truck to deliver goods to major cities. Michael, having a driver's license, took charge of driving, while Shakespeare was responsible for supervising the goods and unloading them, forming a good partnership. On November 15, 2006, during a delivery trip to Miami, their truck stopped at a convenience store in a small town along the way to buy drinks and cigarettes. Shakespeare didn't get out of the truck and asked Michael to buy 2 lottery tickets as well. Shakespeare told him to just pick any numbers. After buying the tickets, Michael put them in his wallet and casually tossed the wallet on the truck. When it was time for the lottery draw, Shakespeare held the ticket and watched the TV intently as the numbers were announced one by one. He was like in a trance. The numbers on the lottery ticket in his hand exactly matched the result of 62333442152, a prize worth up to $30 million. For Shakespeare, who had never owned more than $10, $30 million was an unimaginably huge amount. He trembled with joy, happiness seeming to fall from the sky, making Shakespeare unable to believe his eyes. That entire night, Shakespeare checked the ticket hundreds of times to ensure he wasn't seeing things. He began daydreaming about the plans he would make with this enormous sum of money. The more he thought about it, the more he lost control over his joy, and he stayed awake the entire night. The next day, Shakespeare immediately contacted the lottery company to confirm, and as he hoped, the prize was indeed $30 million, approximately 738 billion VND at current exchange rates. The lottery company presented 2 options for receiving the prize. One was to receive the full amount at once, but with higher taxes, and the other was to receive the money evenly distributed over 20 years with lower taxes to limit spending and ensure more safety and longevity. Many lottery winners often chose the latter option, but Shakespeare was different. He had been poor his entire life and craved to hold that not insignificant sum of cash in his hands. Hence, Shakespeare chose to receive the entire amount at once. After taxes, the amount Shakespeare actually received was $17 million, about 48 billion VND. Although it was nearly half of the original sum, it was still a huge amount of money. Remarkably, at that time, in many states in the U.S., including Florida, to ensure fairness and transparency, the name and address of the lottery winner would be made public. This meant everyone around knew Shakespeare had suddenly become a millionaire. The media also reported extensively about Shakespeare's life-changing story. His image flooded the newspapers. Shakespeare shot to fame, and almost everyone knew him as a millionaire. His $17 million had barely warmed his pockets when troubles came knocking. The first trouble came from Michael, the coworker who had bought the lottery ticket for Shakespeare. Michael sued Shakespeare, claiming, "I bought the lottery ticket. I paid for it. Shakespeare took advantage of my carelessness to steal the ticket, so the $17 million should belong to me." The court conducted an investigation and confirmed that Michael had indeed bought the ticket, but on Shakespeare's behalf. Furthermore, Shakespeare had reimbursed Michael $2 for the ticket at that time, so the ownership of the ticket was Shakespeare's. In court, Shakespeare revealed additional information. After hearing the news of the win, Michael had approached him the next day, demanding a share of $1 million. However, at that time, Shakespeare hadn't yet received the prize money and asked Michael to wait. In truth, Shakespeare intended to give Michael a portion of the winnings, perhaps around $250,000. But Michael did not believe him, thinking that Shakespeare was making excuses to shirk responsibility. Thus, Michael decided to sue Shakespeare. As a result, Michael lost the case and did not receive any money. Compared to the subsequent troubles Shakespeare faced, being sued by a colleague was a minor issue. The real nightmare had only just begun. Shakespeare spent $1 million on a luxurious villa, planning to bring his biological mother to live with him. However, his mother ultimately refused to come. The villa was beautiful, with spacious grounds and a luxurious swimming pool. But many years later, Shakespeare realized that the actual market value of the villa was only about $600,000. From the very first deal, Shakespeare had been swindled out of $400,000 by a real estate agent. Apart from the villa, Shakespeare didn't spend much on himself. He dreamed of owning a car, but ended up buying an ordinary Lexus. He also wished for a Rolex watch, but settled for a used watch from a pawn shop. Shakespeare wasn't one for extravagant spending. He wanted a simple life, enjoying $7 meals at his favorite diner, taking strolls in the nearby park, fishing by the lake, and chatting with friends. Yet those simple pleasures became luxuries for Shakespeare after winning the lottery, because he was no longer himself. Too many people actively sought to befriend Shakespeare. From his ex-wife, stepfather, siblings, distant relatives he had never met, old friends not in contact for long, acquaintances who had once shared meals at the same restaurant, to neighbors, homeless people, and countless strangers. Their purpose was clear and straightforward: to ask for money. Shakespeare was quite generous with everyone because, deep down, he had the soul of a child, always willing to help others. He established a trust fund worth $1 million for his son to ensure a prosperous future. He paid off his stepfather's gambling debts, provided living expenses for his siblings, gave money to relatives, settled old friends' debts, helped the homeless, etc. Even strangers, as long as they asked, Shakespeare couldn't refuse and was always ready to help, covering tuition fees, medical expenses, etc. Within a few months, millions of dollars vanished. Although not too fond of money, such a life left Shakespeare extremely tired and disheartened. Everyone came to him with a purpose, all for money. This was not the life he wanted. He lamented to his close friend, Robert Brown, "If only I were still penniless, things would be so much better. I thought these people were my friends, but I later realized they just wanted my money." Apart from those asking for help, there were also people who wanted to discuss business and partnerships. They presented lucrative projects with huge profits, claiming patents that could change the world. All hoped Shakespeare would invest in their dreams. In reality, these were sophisticated scams to swindle Shakespeare out of his money. Although not knowledgeable about business, Shakespeare followed his friends, advice, and established a company specializing in home repair and maintenance. He even aspired to set up a non-profit organization to help those in need. It must be said that Shakespeare had an extraordinary compassionate heart. In just a few short months, he had squandered over $10 million, mostly on loans or investing in far-fetched dreams. By October 2008, 11 months after becoming a millionaire, Shakespeare's total cash and assets amounted to less than $500,000 USD. At this point, a successful 36-year-old woman, Doree D.D. Moore, approached Shakespeare. Unlike others, D.D. did not complain of poverty or ask for money, nor did she have a dream that required investment. She introduced herself as a successful writer, not lacking in money and needing no help. D.D.'s purpose in meeting Shakespeare was simply to write a book about him, a biography of a poor black man who suddenly became a millionaire, so that people could better understand his story. However, such stories were not unusual in America. Shakespeare also wanted to document his life story. Moreover, D.D. exuded success, confidence, and sincerity, quickly winning Shakespeare's agreement. In the subsequent period, D.D. focused solely on writing the book and did not exhibit any unusual behavior, which satisfied Shakespeare greatly. He truly disliked people who constantly sought to borrow money. Thus, he increasingly trusted D.D., and they gradually became close friends. In reality, by that time, there were scarcely any real friends left around Shakespeare. Almost everyone only had their eyes on his money. Shakespeare felt incredibly tired and disenchanted, having to cut ties with those people, including relatives. Due to his limited education, Shakespeare had no knowledge of how to manage such a huge amount of money or plan for the future. With no one to rely on, Shakespeare became accustomed to seeking D.D.'s opinion on everything. To him, D.D. was a successful woman who understood everything and, importantly, had no intention of borrowing his money. D.D. was someone he could hope for. D.D. was also very enthusiastic in giving Shakespeare advice. Her suggestions seemed reasonable and beneficial for Shakespeare, making him very pleased and trust her even more. A few months later, on February 9, 2009, Shakespeare decided to follow D.D.'s advice and established a company for easier financial management. The company was named after him, Abraham Shakespeare Limited Liability Company. Due to his lack of management experience, he handed over all operational authority to D.D. Setting up the company brought a benefit to Shakespeare. From then on, when anyone wanted to borrow money, he could use the excuse, "My money is managed by the company. D.D. makes the decisions. I have no authority." Solving the money issue made Shakespeare feel relieved. Although aware that not much money was left, it was enough for him to live comfortably for the rest of his life. He wasn't a lavish spender, and now with D.D., a capable person managing his finances, he no longer had to worry about being deceived. Now, he could simply enjoy his life. On November 9, 2009, Shakespeare's cousin Edward reported to the police that he hadn't seen Shakespeare in 6 months. The last time Edward saw Shakespeare was in April, and they had only been communicating via text messages. There is something incredibly strange. Shakespeare only went up to the 7th grade. After all these years, He probably returned most of his knowledge to his teachers. He didn't read or write much, yet in recent messages, his prose has been very fluent. Shakespeare has been completely silent for months, causing much suspicion. On a detectives forum, people have started investigating Shakespeare's mysterious disappearance and have uncovered some bizarre clues. For instance, Didi has moved her son and boyfriend into Shakespeare's mansion. They live very happily, except for the absence of Shakespeare. The detectives hypothesized that it's possible the millionaire had been drained of all his resources, ending up penniless. The local police knew of Shakespeare, so after receiving a report from his family, they started their investigation. Police went to Shakespeare's mansion but did not find him there. They only encountered Didi. Didi immediately asserted that Shakespeare is healthy, but he wanted to avoid people constantly pestering him for money. Didi said that Shakespeare was tired of being exploited by others and decided to leave his hometown to travel around the world. As for Shakespeare's current whereabouts, she was unsure. He could be in Gaspé, California, or somewhere else. Didi also provided some video clips that she personally recorded. In these videos, Shakespeare openly expressed his disappointment with those around him and his intention to leave his hometown to start a new life. On the surface, what Didi says seems reasonable, but the problem is, if Shakespeare wanted to leave, why would he disappear so mysteriously? Furthermore, why is he using a language that is not his forte to message everyone? Shakespeare's mother provided an important clue. On her birthday, Shakespeare sent her a greeting card. What surprised her was that the wording on the card was very fluent, unlike her son's limited writing ability. Moreover, Shakespeare also called to assure her of his well-being, but his voice did not sound like him. Combining these clues and the lack of an exit record for Shakespeare, the police believe the case has many hidden sides, possibly indicating that something bad has happened to him. As for the suspect, those who had borrowed money from Shakespeare and did not want to repay it, were prime suspects. This also explains why no one reported Shakespeare missing for such a long time. To those debtors, his disappearance might have been a fortunate event. The police began to investigate those who had borrowed substantial amounts from Shakespeare, mainly his relatives, with loans ranging from tens of thousands to $1 million. However, after some time, the police didn't find any suspicious signs. Strikingly, the more they investigated, the more they found that Shakespeare had indeed been erased. All his assets had been transferred to Didi, including the debts. Even the $1 million mansion Shakespeare bought previously now belonged to Didi's company. Additionally, Didi withdrew $1 million from Shakespeare's company account to buy a Hummer H2 worth $90, a Chevrolet Corvette worth $70,000, a truck, and many other luxury items. Didi's blatant actions made it easy for anyone to see the dark intentions behind them. The police immediately summoned Didi to the station for questioning. However, she steadfastly claimed that Shakespeare had gone traveling, and she didn't know his whereabouts. Regarding the mansion, she said she bought it legally and paid Shakespeare to $6 to $55,000. The vehicles and luxury items were simply gifts from Shakespeare. Didi's explanations were clearly false, but without evidence. the police couldn't take any action against her. The pressing issue now was whether Shakespeare was alive or dead. The police were at a deadlock with the case. They understood that the key to cracking the missing persons case was finding Shakespeare. If he were alive, everything would be resolved peacefully. But if he had been murdered, they needed to find his body or evidence proving it. Amidst the police's deadlock, Shakespeare's ex-girlfriend, Santoria, contacted them. Santoria is the woman who had Shakespeare's second child. Indeed, Shakespeare has 2 children. After winning the lottery, Shakespeare met Santoria, and they had a child together. However, their relationship quickly fell apart. Naturally, Shakespeare supported Santoria with a substantial amount of money. Santoria revealed that Dee had once approached her with an offer to give her a house worth 200,000 and a car in exchange for falsely testifying to the police that she had Shakespeare at the time with Shakespeare at the police for the night expend time he went missing. It wasn't just Santoria, but also Shakespeare's barber friend, Smith, who testified. Smith had borrowed money from Shakespeare to buy a house, but unlike others, he repaid Shakespeare monthly. Smith stated that Dee had contacted him and asked him to call Shakespeare's mother, claiming that Shakespeare was fine, but had gotten into a fight at a club and couldn't come home yet. These clues made the police even more convinced that Shakespeare had been murdered and that Dee was very likely the culprit. The police approached Smith and asked him to help with the investigation. Being kind-hearted, Smith agreed to become an informant to gather information from Dee. The plan to trap Dee was officially set in motion. Knowing Dee's cunning and intelligence, Smith concealed a listening device inside a Deadpool figurine so he could carry it at all times. The police were very pleased with this opportunity. On January 2010, Smith prepared to meet Dee and coax her into revealing information. As expected, Dee was very cautious. She knew she was under police surveillance and wanted to dispel any suspicion. To prove that Shakespeare was still alive, Dee racked her brain. She wanted Smith to write a letter pretending to be Shakespeare and then place it in Shakespeare's mother's mailbox. Dee believed that because Smith was a close friend of Shakespeare, he would know personal details about him, making the letter more convincing for Shakespeare's mother. The content of the letter was as follows. Shakespeare was in trouble and might go to jail, so he couldn't contact his family at the moment. He reassured his mother that he was doing well. At the end of the letter, Shakespeare emphasized that Dee was the only one who had helped him, urging his mother to trust her. To cover up the fact that Shakespeare was illiterate, Dee added a line at the end of the letter. "These are my words. I asked friends to write them for me." Overall, the letter's content was quite believable. If Smith had not been a police informant, Dee's plan might have succeeded. Of course, the letter was immediately handed over to the police. As for Dee, she still believed everything was going according to plan, and that once Shakespeare's mother received the letter, the police would consider it a missing persons case. However, the harsh truth was that the police not only continued their investigation, but also held a press conference, asking the public for information about Shakespeare with our 10,000 reward, equivalent to about 246 million VND at current exchange rates. Dee Dee was extremely confused and worried. Why wasn't the letter working? She had calculated everything so carefully. Dee Dee repeatedly contacted Smith to discuss the next plan. At this point, Smith proposed an idea. He said, "My cousin was arrested for drug trafficking. He is being heavily pursued with no way out. If caught, he will definitely get a life sentence. If Dee Dee pays, my cousin is willing to take the blame and serve the sentence for Dee Dee in the case of Shakespeare's murder. After all, the sentence would be the same. Moreover, Dee Dee would have to pay my cousin a substantial amount." Dee Dee found this reasonable, but, being cautious, she didn't trust easily. She wanted to meet Smith's cousin in person to discuss the plan. The police then sent an officer, posing as Smith's cousin named Mike, to approach Dee Dee. Eventually, Dee Dee agreed to pay all of $50,000 for Mike to take the blame. However, Mike demanded Dee Dee reveal how Shakespeare was killed, ideally showing the body or the weapon, so he could craft a convincing story for the police. Although this plan was risky, after careful consideration, Dee Dee agreed. This was the first time Dee Dee admitted that Shakespeare was dead. The next day, Dee Dee handed Smith a .38 caliber revolver and a map showing the location of Shakespeare's body. With these crucial clues, the police acted immediately. On January 26, 2010, the police went to the location marked on the map, a garden in a house owned by Dee Dee, and began digging. The next day, the body of a man was found under a thick layer of concrete. Upon autopsy, the police confirmed it was Shakespeare, who had been missing for 9 months. The victim wore a black jacket, a light-colored shirt, and jeans, matching the clothes Shakespeare was last seen wearing in a video from September 1, 2009. The police believe that Shakespeare was murdered on September 1, 2009, and on that day, only Dee Dee was with him. All of this points to Dee Dee being the culprit in Shakespeare's murder. According to the autopsy results, he was shot twice in the chest. The murderer acted right in front of the victim. The police identified the initial crime scene as the mansion where Shakespeare watched the video on September 1, 2009. They obtained a search warrant and found Shakespeare's bloodstains at the scene. The police immediately arrested Dee Dee and charged her with murder. Theodora Dee Dee Moore, born July 25, 1972, in a financially struggling family in Lakeland, Florida. The difficult circumstance caused Dee Dee to crave money from a young age. She wanted to wear nice clothes, go shopping, and ride luxury cars, but her family couldn't afford it. Her high self-esteem led Dee Dee to always pretend to be wealthy in front of her friends, lying that her parents were company directors and that her family was very affluent. To maintain this image, every time her parents drove her to school, Dee Dee would ask them to stop some distance away from the school. She would then walk to school to avoid her friends discovering her family didn't have a luxury car. After graduating from high school, Dee Dee became a nurse like her mother. She then married Jimmy B. Moore, her high school boyfriend, and they had a son. Her husband's job as a nurse was quite stable with a decent income, but Dee Dee never felt satisfied. She always wanted to display her success in front of her friends. Therefore, branded clothes, jewelry, and luxury cars were must-haves for Dee Dee. if she didn't have enough money, she would borrow to buy them. Dee Dee always wanted to be the center of attention. At times when she ran out of money, Dee Dee even exploited trust to commit fraud. In 1999, at the age of 27, Dee Dee was given a suspended sentence for theft. After that, she was repeatedly arrested for other fraud charges. However, since the amounts were not significant, Dee Dee was only fined and given suspended sentences. Dee Dee's job at Acadia Insurance Company was very successful. She was even promoted to branch manager. However, Dee Dee spent extravagantly to maintain her image, causing her expenses to often exceed her income. Her insatiable greed turned Dee Dee into a professional scammer, unscrupulous in her methods. She even embezzled money from the company. When the company discovered discrepancies in the records, Dee Dee burned all the documents to destroy evidence. To avoid repaying her car loan, Dee Dee often pretended to be kidnapped or trapped, or that her house was burglarized, etc. Dee Dee also once opened her own company, but later declared bankruptcy to avoid debt. Dee Dee's extravagant lifestyle led to the breakdown of her marriage and alienation from friends. Yet Dee Dee didn't care. She quickly found a new boyfriend, 10 years younger than her, and continued her lavish lifestyle. In 2008, upon hearing the news that Shakespeare had won at our 30 million lottery, Dee Dee recognized an opportunity to change her life. She immediately approached Shakespeare, and the story unfolds as we know. Based on the collected evidence, the police asserted that Dee Dee was the murderer. However, Dee Dee stubbornly denied her guilt. To prevent Dee Dee from fleeing, the court issued an order forbidding her from communicating with anyone except her lawyer and required her to post a $100,000 bond for bail while awaiting trial. Dee Dee was still very defiant, saying she wasn't afraid of being found guilty of murder because no jury would convict her. They say I used a gun to shoot Shakespeare, which clearly isn't true. I would never do that. In fact, the evidence the police had gathered was mainly circumstantial. There were no eyewitnesses to Dee Dee assaulting Shakespeare. The circumstantial evidence included suspicious asset transfers. After Dee Dee approached Shakespeare, most of his assets and debts were transferred to her or her company. This showed Dee Dee had a significant financial motive. Given her history of unscrupulous money-making methods, this motive was entirely plausible. The secret conversations an informant named Smith had recorded multiple conversations between Dee Dee and him. Although she didn't outright admit to the murder, Dee Dee repeatedly implied that Shakespeare was dead. Moreover, Dee Dee tried to maintain a false narrative by faking text messages and hiring someone to impersonate Shakespeare to create an alibi. Phone trace evidence. The police analyzed data from cell towers and found that Shakespeare's phone was always near Dee Dee's phone. This indicated that all of Shakespeare's communication with the outside world was controlled by Dee Dee. She was the only suspect. The weapon and witness, the gun that Dee Dee handed over to Smith, was the sole weapon in the case. This gun had always been kept by Dee Dee. After Shakespeare was murdered, she hid the gun at a friend's house. Dee Dee also called her ex-husband, Zem, asking him to dig a hole in front of the house. Zem later testified, confirming this but insisted he didn't know what Dee wanted to bury. Other evidence. During the investigation, the police found surveillance footage showing Dee shopping at a supermarket. She purchased rubber gloves, duct tape, and a plastic sheet. All these items were found near Shakespeare's body. Combined with testimonies from other witnesses, this circumstantial evidence formed a complete chain of evidence. Based on the above evidence, the prosecutor reconstructed the sequence of events in the crime. After being deceived and transferring his assets to Dee for some time, Shakespeare saw Dee's true nature. Conflict arose between them, and Dee was determined not to let her prey go. She resorted to the most ruthless method, killing Shakespeare to silence him. After committing the murder, Dee tried to stage the scene, creating fake evidence to prove Shakespeare was still alive. During the trial, Dee unexpectedly switched her story, declaring she wanted to tell the truth to the police. She claimed that Shakespeare was killed by a drug dealer named Thonan. During an altercation, Thonan shot Shakespeare dead. This story was likely fabricated by Dee beforehand. In conversations with undercover agent Smith, she frequently mentioned Thonan. The police investigated but could not find any information on this person. Realizing she couldn't deceive the police, Dee fabricated another story. Shakespeare was killed by his cousin who had an outstanding case, Ed Dorm. The reason was that Ed Dorm often asked Shakespeare for money, but was refused, leading to an argument. Ed Dorm, in a fit of rage, shot Shakespeare dead. The police immediately dismissed this claim. If Ed Dorm were the culprit, he would never have willingly turned himself in. Moreover, the police found no evidence against him. When the police remained unconvinced, Dee recklessly played her trump card. She claimed that her 14-year-old son, Robert James, shot Shakespeare. Dee said that on that night, Shakespeare behaved inappropriately towards her son in a parking lot. Robert James used a gun to shoot Shakespeare twice to protect himself. Naturally, Dee's absurd testimony was dismissed by the court. The police and the court, of course, did not believe those unreasonable justifications. On December 10, 2012, after a prolonged trial, the jury unanimously declared Dee guilty of murder, sentencing her to life imprisonment without parole. The judge concluded that Dee was the most cunning individual he had ever encountered. This was a brutal, premeditated murder motivated purely by money. Dee meticulously planned to create fake evidence, making everyone believe Shakespeare was still alive, thereby concealing her crime. After the trial, Dee wrote a letter of apology to Shakespeare's family, but stubbornly denied her crime. In prison, Dee continued to fabricate stories, this time accusing Shakespeare's close friend, Smith, of being the murderer. Dee claimed that Shakespeare had an affair with Smith's wife, and upon discovering it, Smith killed Shakespeare to avenge himself. Naturally, no one believed Dee's words anymore. To everyone, she was a deceiver who never spoke the truth. Dee even went as far as falsely accusing her own son to escape punishment. Facing public condemnation, Dee continued her act. She claimed that her lawyer, Baugh, did not defend her wholeheartedly during the trial, causing her wrongful conviction. Dee said, "He didn't defend me at all. Not at all. He was terrifying. Lawyer Ball later refuted Didi's accusations, asserting that he and his associates had worked diligently and were not negligent in the case. Moreover, all the evidence pointed to Didi as the culprit. No matter how powerful, there was no way to deny it. In 2019, Didi filed a request for a retrial. In this petition, she blamed another of her lawyers, Byron, for being ineffective and causing her wrongful conviction. In reality, by this time, lawyer Byron had passed away. The Florida Court of Appeals had twice rejected Didi's appeal in 2015 and 2019, upholding her life sentence. In a prison interview, Didi still insisted she was innocent and vowed to continue her appeal. However, the chances are slim. It is very likely that Didi will die in prison. Notably, in June 2017, the mother of Shakespeare's eldest son, Andrew, won a $1 million prize from a Dar 20 lottery ticket. It seems luck smiled on Shakespeare's family again. Although very happy, Andrew felt more worried. She shared with the press, "I fear that I will lose my courage when writing about Shakespeare's legacy, so I will be moving and living more discreetly." The tragic case of Shakespeare has led many people to protest against the public disclosure of lottery winners' information in the United States. They believe this is too dangerous and could turn lottery winners into easy targets for predators. American history has recorded many cases where lottery winners were murdered. To protect themselves, many lottery winners have had to leave their hometowns, cut ties with family and friends. The U.S. government is also aware of this issue. Currently, many states allow lottery winners to keep their identities anonymous when claiming their prize. Of course, if the winner insists on revealing their identity, they are very accommodating. Shakespeare's tragedy leaves people feeling perplexed. It's often said, blessings and misfortunes are unpredictable. Within misfortune lies a blessing, and within a blessing, the seeds of misfortune. The relationship between blessings and misfortunes is one of cause and effect. The story of a life transformed overnight is indeed alluring, but it is only the rare luck of a few. Such luck could even be orchestrated, hiding darker agendas. For most of us ordinary people, rather than dreaming, we should focus on paths to financial freedom through perseverance and sound principles.